Rowena Dooley, asking Sol citizens to report for duty. Dooley, asking Sol citizens to report for duty.
And greetings. Welcome back to Soul Citizens. I'm GriffinGamingRPG, and today is February the 4th, first weekend in February, and we are back for another show, and I'm back with a couple of my very cool travelers to CitizenCon last year that I got to meet and hang out with. We've got on my left and your right, we've got a raid. We've got a raid from New Souls. That's what we got first of 9. Thank you, New Soul. Thank you for sending over your folks from your party. Hope you had a great afternoon. I'm sure you tore down the house. The captain came in and said that you had it rocking over there today. So I hope you guys had a good time. And thank you. Welcome, Raiders, those of you who are here. Giving out shouts again to on my left side, your right side. yoyoMeg. What's up, Meg? How are you?
I am good. How are you?
I'm doing good. You're looking pretty energetic tonight. You ready for the show tonight?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right, Meg, be on it. All right. And on my right and your left, the one and the only CaptainSeriousFun. Captain SF, what's up?
Greetings and salutations, Griff. How are you?
Good.
It's always good to be with you. It's always good to be with Meg. I'm ready to do this thing tonight.
I'm ready. Charles, what's going on? DCI, thank you so much for that sub. We appreciate the support, and we just appreciate you being here. So thank you so much for that. We really do appreciate you. As you guys can see, the topic for the show this week is dynamic events. And I think most of you, if not everyone here, is familiar with dynamic events in Star Citizen. We have been testing dynamic events, even though they don't really happen in a dynamic way, but the testing is part of this process of being in an alpha. But for those of you who don't know, dynamic events are supposed to be eventually occurrences that happen in the Star Citizen universe because of actions or reactions of the players. That could be due to some actions such as piracy. It could be an action such as the economy. It could be an action due to a mining group that's working in the verse. But the idea is that these spontaneous events will take place. And they just won't happen randomly, but they'll happen because something has happened in the universe to cause them to happen. So for right now, we've been getting them from a testing point. So we get an announcement. CIG says, hey, we're going to be testing such and such this weekend. We're going to be touching such and such till February 5th. And so we kind of get time to go in and do it. But ultimately, the idea is that these events will spawn off. They will spring off unexpectedly And if you're in the area, maybe you become a witness to it. Maybe if you're somewhere else in the verse, you just get a chance to hear about it. But we're going to be talking about dynamic events. We're going to talk about the origin of them. At the beginning of the show, we're going to be watching a little video with Tony Z talking about how this whole thing came about. Then we're going to spend some time talking about the current dynamic events that we've had in the game. And then we're going to give you a little bit of theory crafting and talk about some ideas for dynamic events. And we'd love to hear in chat what you guys also think will be great for dynamic events later. So without further ado, let me go to my compadres here, and I'm going to go back to Meg first. Meg, I know you've had a chance to participate in some of the dynamic events. Have you been able to participate in all of them, or is there some you didn't do, or some you did a little bit more than less, or is there a favorite one that you have?
I've just done, I don't know if there was, I think you were talking about another one that potentially was taken away, but I've definitely done Jumptown, Xenothreat, and Siege of Orson. My favorite's definitely Xenothreat.
Okay. Why that one in particular?
I just feel like it's a bunch of chaos and ship fighting. And then like you separate the ship fighting and have to get out of your ships or hold off, I mean, like I'm just explaining the event itself, but having to like have certain people do certain things versus in my opinion, I feel like Jumptown's just PvP and Siege of Orson is like you just go shoot people and leave. Xenothreat's more like you have to find the specific cargo in specific ships, and there's like 3 variants. Some can't be quantumed. Some have to be like they can't be thrown around to like very particular. Takes a little more brain power and less just speed running. So I like that event the most for that.
I got you, Captain. Same question to you. Have you done all the various ones that we have? I know we're going to talk about them in detail a little bit later, but is there anyone that you favor or anyone that you didn't get a chance to do?
So I've done them all. I dislike Nine Tails Blockade with a passion. And I join Meg in saying that I feel like the Xenothreat dynamic event was the most enjoyable to me because there were so many different things to do within the event. Right.
Okay.
So yeah, we'll talk about it later, but that's how I've done them all, and that's my favorite and my least favorite.
Okay. Fair enough. Okay, well, we're going to go ahead and jump into it. And again, like I said, we're going to do a breakdown on these a little bit later, but we do want to start out with a little opening. Before we do that, as you guys saw, we opened up the show today, kind of giving a little dedication to Carl Weathers. Many of you guys know Carl Weathers passed away on February 1st. The announcement came out on the 2nd. Definitely impact in the community of theater and acting and film. Some of us grew up on watching him. Some of us just recently found out about Carl Weathers. But we do want to give our condolences to the family. And obviously he's going to be missed, particularly because he's definitely stepped into the world of science fiction through the Star Wars series, The Mandalorian, and became a very quickly beloved character, directed some of the episodes there. So we will missing him. But we did want to kind of do a little special dedication. Also, because as you guys know, each year during African American or Black History Month, we spend a few minutes highlighting someone that has impacted the world in some way, usually in the areas of fiction, science fiction, computers, whatever the case may be. And so today we're going to do a little dedication toward him at the end. So stick around for it. I think you'll really, really enjoy it. And maybe learn some things about Carl Weathers that maybe you didn't know. I learned some things when I watched it myself. But before we get to that, let's get into the show. Let's jump into this on dynamic events. Let's see if I've got everything set up here. I think I have everything queued up here for this. All right, so we're going to open up with our video here of our well-beloved Tony Z. And let me see if I've got everything set. I think I do. Maybe I don't. Yeah, that's it. And here we go. Hope we got something to drink and chew on.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Star Citizen Live Dynamic Events with Tony Zurabek. I'm your host, Jared Huckabee. And if you've never seen Star Citizen Live before, it's where we take about an hour out of the end of our week and check in with developers, see what they're doing, talk about the things that they're working on. Sometimes we watch them make something live. Today, we have a gentleman who's probably no stranger to most Star Citizens, but we're going to take the time to introduce him anyway. Meet Tony Zurabek. Tony, how you doing, man?
Hi, how's it going? Tony Zurabek, Director of Persistent Universe.
All right, so the Director of Persistent Universe, we're just going to jump right into this. The last time we saw you was CitizenCon 2949. Years, right? I checked in with our data solutions teams. We've gained over 500,000 citizens since then. So somebody watching right now has no idea who you are. So take a few moments before we jump into this. Tell them who you are, what the director of persistent, or what your position does? Some of the things you work on. I'm gonna get out of your way.
I have a lot of focus on what I'd say is like the simulation of the world, getting all the systemic elements operational, AI and mission architecture, back-end services that provide a lot of information to the game servers. Also, a lot of some of the occupational stuff we're working on. Some advanced bounty hunting, functionality. A lot of the interfaces, for everything from from shops to insurance to cargo loading. Just it's really a wide variety of things all over the map.
The systemic services, like the day-to-day operation of the persistent life in the persistent universe, kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's multiple aspects of that. Historically, it's been a lot of focus on the persistent stuff. That's now starting to shift over to a new group is basically going to take it and run with that. And we're going to basically affect a handover, a transition, and we're basically taking some of those existing resources, and we're going to retask them with helping to add some additional bandwidth into some of these areas that we've been wanting to flesh out for an extended period of time, but there are always so many other higher priorities. And we think just as of pretty recently, like within the last literally month or so, we've finally eliminated enough of the bottlenecks on the back end side to where we can pretty confidently support at least 20,000 players concurrently. Might be higher. It's difficult to say until you actually stress test some of these things. But we ran into some problems at the Fleet Week, the 2020 Fleet Week, and we took the lessons we learned there, and it was kind of unfortunate timing in that particular case, because we knew that we weren't going to be able to support more dramatically more players than we had in the near term past when we launched that event, and we didn't really think that was going to be a problem, because we had for the previous year, we had it in our development schedule to deliver the final bits of iCache and to basically scale a number of the loadout service, the variable service, all to cache all the login credentials, all of this type of stuff that we're supposed to to alleviate, to mitigate a lot of these bottlenecks. And unfortunately, that last Fleet Week event proved to be so popular that we wound up during probably about twice the number of concurrent users that we actually expected. And so what that did is it caused us to reprioritize some things so that we could get select pieces of that of that functionality out sooner. And many of those things are now operational. And so while there's still definitely plenty more to do, we think that we've got a decent amount of headroom given where given where we think the community involvement is going to be for the next few quarters. And then longer term, we've obviously got some major initiatives still on the horizon. Like server meshing, which is where we're actually looking to distribute the workload across as many servers as is necessary, so that we can start to scale up the actual number of players within a given instance or shard of the game.
Yeah. All right. So you just mentioned knowing where players are going to be and stuff for the next couple quarters. That brings us to the topic of this particular show, which is dynamic events. Now, dynamic events is a phrase that our community has heard several times, whispers here and there over the last year, almost 2 years, going back to 2019, back when we referred to it as timed events in some of the monthly reports stuff. Let's just start things off with a primer here. What is a dynamic event?
So you have to give a little bit of explanation first. Like, the long-term objective for Star Citizen has always been a dynamic, evolving universe. Most of our existing content to date, though, has been inherently static. So missions are offered at a given price at a particular location because a designer dictated it, not because something within the economic pipeline actually required that work be done. So If you're refueling, reloading, or repairing a ship, that doesn't actually increase the demand and thus the price for the associated commodities and components at refineries or shops. Similarly, the likelihood of running into a pirate on a given route doesn't waver regardless of whether a lot of unarmed cargo transports carrying valuable materials start traveling that path. So Quantum, which is the simulation that I showed off at the last CitizenCon, that's the primary method by which we're going to address this. And it simulates the effect of a vast amount of AI, and it then feeds those results to the game and then factors player actions back into the simulation. So you wind up with this very logical ebb and flow that you'd expect, and that creates a lot of temporary opportunities for people to exploit, and in general, it just makes the game feel far more interesting to play. So dynamic events are different. You can think of them you can think of them a bit as designer-driven short stories that can be layered on top of Quantum's systemic background, and they can be triggered manually or automatically when certain conditions are met. So if the system decides that war is broken out in an area, or we just decide that we want to liven things up a little, then designers and writers can inject a lot of precisely curated content into the game, and the impact of those modifications will then be blended into the simulation.
That's really, you said there's two ways to trigger them. Either we can set up situations, criterias in which the players meet them, and the system automatically goes, oh yeah, trigger this particular event that's been designed, or we can trigger them manually. Just describe to me the difference there. Why would we use one over the other for a particular situation?
Well, it's actually similar to a lot of what we've done with the normal development cycle, which is, on the one hand, we're putting out a live product, and so we have to build, we have to have something that the community can play right now. But at the same time, we're planning for the future. And so if you think about shops as an example, if all that a shop was going to do was basically offer a certain number of items for sale or a particular price, then the effort that we've expended to get us to here, was dramatically over-engineered. And it's been that way for the last 2.5 years. And it's only now that you're starting to bring in Quantum and have Quantum start to dictate some of this information, these services, which then cache this information. And they're also responsible for basically receiving callbacks from the individual shops and then feeding, on occasion, some of those transactional events back to the mission instances that are running on some of these servers, that you start to see why we made some of the choices we did back then. And in other words, it's kind of like before you can get around to building the skyscraper, you have to lay the foundation. And so we've said this so many times in the past, and we're starting to get to the point now to where we're starting to exploit, some of these underlying pieces. I mean, Quantum's another perfect example in that regard, in that we have these so-called probability volumes that dictate what sort of stuff you can encounter in a given area of space. And then we have shops, and we have service beacons, and we have all of these different systems. But right now, designers go in, even missions, what missions are available where and for what amount of money, and what level of risk you're going to incur when you actually accept them. That's all fixed right now. The designers are able to set up these data structures, but what we haven't previously been able to do is provide the real-time dynamic inputs that would allow us to make these things ebb and flow. In other words, if there's currently a lot of pirates in an area, then having something delivered to that area should logically cost more. There's a greater risk to you and your ship and and all that type of stuff. But designers haven't had the tools to be able to automatically feed that type of real-time information into these mission archetypes that they're setting up. And we're just now getting across a wide range of areas into doing some of that. And so there is an update that I'll be giving within roughly the next few months that will basically explain what we've been working on insofar as not just quantum, but also some related, back-end technologies to help generate this, this algorithmic, this systemically derived, information, and then feed it into the game. And in a few cases, we've actually, we'll actually be able to demonstrate, real, actual working examples as opposed to, just being theory. I always hate to do too many, repeated theory talks, and so one of the things we debated doing this presentation a little bit earlier, but it still would have been in the vein of, it's coming, it's coming. And so I intentionally wanted to hold it back a few extra months so that we could demonstrate some of this stuff live and actually show some of these pieces of tech and functionality coming to fruition.
Yeah. I do want to add on top of that, just for the community, this update that Tony is talking about that will come. We're not going to say when. Let's be real. We don't have a great history of saying, "Hey, we're going to have this video out then," but we're working on it, and and from what I've already seen, it's pretty awesome. Tyler's in my chat right now, like, tell people it's awesome. It is awesome.
It's kind of like a release to where there are certain things you want to demonstrate, and there's always a little bit of uncertainty, with respect to development schedules. And so it's difficult to say precisely, but we are already deep into testing multiple facets of what we're aiming to deliver. So it's coming.
Yeah, just in our long history of saying, hey, we're going to have a special video out at this point talking about this thing. Our track record's not so good here. So just hang tight. All right. So right now on the PTU, there's a dynamic event, our first dynamic event called Xenothreat that's currently being tested now. Without spoiling the event, we obviously don't want to break it down and be like, hey, phase one is this. We don't want to go into that much detail on it. But tell us what Xenothreat is, what we're hoping to accomplish.
There were two primary things on our mind when thinking about this event, and we started discussing this internally probably almost a year ago. Back in first quarter 2020, what we wanted to achieve, and the other thing that we wanted, besides it being fun, was that it wouldn't cause us to deviate too much from the natural trajectory of the development effort. In other words, it couldn't be too disruptive. We wanted to take the things that logically followed in terms of the development effort and look for ways that we could exploit and reveal these to players and basically improve the overall gameplay experience. And in certain cases, of course, a little bit more effort here, pushing something else back to free up some bandwidth so that we could polish something a little sooner than it would otherwise be the case. That always happens. And so one of the primary things that we wanted to do was get all of the mission and backend infrastructure operational. And this is, for example, there's backend tools now, and I'll cover this, in the upcoming presentation, to activate and monitor and deactivate missions. And that's, again, if you look at Xenothreat, the amount of work that's gone into allowing this event to basically be to be activated is far larger than what you're able to see right now. What I mean by that is it exposes an entirely different way for designers to start to set these things up. They're able to, for example, within the when they're crafting the mission archetype logic, they can now declare these static instanced variables that are managed by the back end. And they also have the concept of phases, which are conditionals that can be associated with these variables that are managed by the back end. And the significance of this is that we can coordinate mission logic across all the different servers. And that's how Xenothreat fundamentally works, which is we have 4 phases in this mission. There's the introductory phase where we're kind of like, giving, we're hinting that, something's to come. We're doing some foreshadowing. There's the actual, javelin restocking, phase. Then there is, the climactic battle scene. And then there's the conclusion. And all of these, are really, they're representative. And what this event allowed us to do, most most importantly was to test and refine and get all this stuff out and working in the real world. Like so now you've actually got a dynamic mission service, and you actually have the concept of these global variables, and the mission, and the designers are able to communicate with them through subsumption task archetypes, and we're able to do these conditional evaluations. We're able to basically have the backend synchronize however many servers we have to keep them all in lockstep. And then there's all sorts of fine tuning that goes on to where, well, if you've got a particular server and it's in, say, phase 2, and they're restocking and they've got the Javelin in port, and then and the designers can actually set it up to do things, and they are things like the number of Javelins that are successfully restocked in phase 2 can then serve as an input to phase 3, such that the frequency of support you get from the UEE Navy depends upon how successful you were in defending those ships in that earlier phase. And again, it's what matters less is the specifics of what we're doing, right this moment with that, and more what we're allowing the designers to do in the future, how we're basically unblocking them to to do lots more cool stuff. Another big focus for this particular event, a major one, was from the beginning we knew that we wanted to put a lot of emphasis, for the first time on the capital ship battles. So there were a litany of changes that we needed to make in order to enable this, and at the very top of the list was how the AI responded to the threat of torpedoes. So originally, and I say this was still true as of about 4 months ago when we finally got to the major push in that regard. Originally, neither turrets nor ships tasked with defending a capital ship paid them any heed. And that meant that it was way too easy to take these capital ships out in the early days. It was literally trivial. It was no fun at all. And so we spent over a month fine-tuning various systems so that countermeasures would be launched and worked as expected. Turrets would prioritize major incoming threats like a torpedo over most other things. Players would be rewarded for coordinating their attacks with one another. Like you tend to be much more successful if 3 players launch torpedoes at the same time. And and we built in into the logic this sense to where it's not like it's
proper target selection.
Well, what we didn't want to do is make it too robotic, too precise, not because you might not have that 1,000 years in the future, but simply because it's not fun. And so what we wanted to do, if it targets perfectly and if it's able to, perfectly shift its attention, it simply didn't deliver the gameplay feeling that we wanted. And so again, we've spent weeks and weeks tweaking, fine-tuning this until we were internally pretty happy with the results. Another good example was the Idris. The Idris was originally pretty suicidal in that it would happily engage the Javelin and get destroyed as long as it managed to get off its railgun. And so its logic wound up evolving to the point where it's now much more opportunistic. It wants to use its railgun, but only when that doesn't put it in too much danger. And then one other thing that we noticed was that the turret targeting couldn't be so Boolean. It couldn't focus 100% of its attention on an attacker that was only slightly more attractive than another player, because again, it looked artificial, and most importantly, it just wasn't very fun for the other players. We were getting internal reports of you have 8 turrets active on a ship, and you've got 16 players, and that when it was so Boolean, meant that at least half of the players were not having any of that firepower focused on them even for an instant, and so they felt relatively bored in terms of the danger presented to them.
You want to be shot at if you're attacking, if you're jumping in the battle with an Idris and a Javelin. You want to be shot at. You want to feel like I'm a threat. Shoot at me.
Yeah, and so there's a lot more fuzziness in grain, and it took time to basically work through all these details. I mean, we sat through every single week reviewing what how it looked when you basically fired individual torpedoes at a ship. How it looked when you fired multiple torpedoes. How it looked if you fired multiple torpedoes with a very small differential in time versus a large differential in time. How the ship responded when it still had countermeasures available. And then another aspect of this was the support ships that basically defend these capital ships. It's the same thing, to where even if you're firing upon them, if a torpedo is launched at the capital ship, they'll see that as a greater threat, break off, potentially at risk to themselves, and prioritize dealing with that torpedo. And so there's a multitude of these things that had to be worked through. And there's, of course, there's more we could do. There's more we will do. It's by no means, perfect, but it's light years. I mean, I hesitate to say it's light years beyond where we were, when this started, because some of this stuff hadn't even realistically gotten off the ground, and now it's actually in some of these select areas, it's actually quite mature.
Okay, I'm going to stop there because we're going to take Tony Z in small bites. That was a 20-minute bite. Before the show got started, I asked Meg, had she ever sat through a Tony Z speech, and she said no. And Captain busted up laughing when I asked her that. So we told her, make sure to get something to drink and some snacks so you'll be ready. So I'm going to go to Meg first. And Meg, you don't have to elaborate on any major technical thing, but since this is your first time seeing Tony Z and seeing him, and since you've done Xenothreat, and you're hearing him kind of break down all the work they had to do, what are your first impressions of hearing about this? I don't have audio for some reason. It's
because I'm muted. That makes sense.
Okay, gotcha. I thought it was me.
First thing that comes to mind for me is actually a question. So they were talking about. So I'm not used to games like this. That's like MMO open world, playing with a bunch of other people.
Mm-hmm.
So when he was talking about things or needing to do other things in order to activate the dynamic event, is that something that they're still planning to do?
Yeah, that's what we were talking about earlier. Like Disco at the opening talked about that there are two ways they can activate them. One could be manually, which means that like when we do it right now, they just activate it, right? But then he talked about those situations where certain things happen in the universe. And like, for example, one of the things that they talked about would be dynamic. And this is like a totally crude illustration. I'm not tying it to Xenothreat or anything. But let's just say that there are, like, how a lot of times people will go to Microtech because they go do the trade runs, right, with gold, right? And they're running back and forth. What happened is the system detected that there was a lot of piracy going on there, that they're seeing ships getting blown up all the time, making that certain route. Then all of a sudden you'll start getting UEE ships lining up in that path and maybe starting to interdict, ships that are going back and forth, right? And what that does is that when that starts to happen, right, it means that the pirates now are going to have to find some other way to be able to do whatever it is they want to do. Or if the piracy, let's say that the pirates are NPC pirates, right? And all of a sudden NPC pirates start showing up. Well, now that means the traders have got to figure out a different route now. So the idea of this is that these are the things that kind of keep the game fresh so that we don't get this meta of knowing, if I just jump to here, I can always get in and out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So does that kind of answer the question a little bit?
Yeah, it does. That's okay. I heard talking about it in the video, and that's the first thing that came to my mind.
Yeah, and this, mind you, listen, to answer your question too. This video was from 3 years ago, so this is when Xenothreat is first getting kicked out, to us and whatnot. So these are the things that they had the considerations and all the things that they had to think about, to implement it. Okay.
Yeah.
Cap, what about you? Anything stick out to you in this?
Just a reminder that a number of components that will make up, I can't think of a better term for it other than the background simulation, are going to be legion. We are going to have a lot of small things that are connected to bigger things, that are connected to patterned things, that are connected to NPC behavior. We still haven't heard anything that's changed the 9 NPCs for every one player plan for populating this universe. And so 9 out of every 10 entities are going to be driven by a whole set of rules that I hope Tony Z has written down.
Yeah,
I hope it's not just in his mind.
Can I ask you a question? Because I got a little distracted at the beginning, but what was he talking about about the 20,000 number? I missed that. Was he talking about players or NPCs? You guys remember what he was talking about?
I thought it was players.
That's what I thought he said. Players. That's what I thought he said. Players. Okay, I thought it wasn't crazy after all, because I was trying to get something else on the technical end over here, and I heard 20,000, and I thought he said players, but I'm like, well, maybe he was saying 20,000 NPCs in the area. But wow, okay.
Yeah, Thrack is thank you very much for the gifted sub.
Yes, thank you so much. Community sub. Okay. All right. We'll hit round 2 here. We'll do 3 breaks in here. That's the first of 3. So let's take on the next part here.
You mentioned a couple things I want to follow up on. First off, the process of bringing capital ship battles to life and all the balance decisions and all the new technologies that were required to bring up. That's actually the topic of next week's ISC. So, we've got a lot there. Yeah, some of it you just heard from Tony, but we'll dive into more detail in next week's ISC. I wanted to talk to you about other things you touched on. You mentioned some shared information between servers. Yeah, and that's something relatively new. That's a new aspect.
It's totally. This is literally the first demonstration of of this tech. There's more to come. Like another thing we're working on the back inside is like right now we have the ability to, when the designers craft this mission logic, all of that logic previously, all the data was basically stored on the server. So if you have 200 servers, you had 200 different instances. And so what you're now seeing is like the first example of us allowing the designers to split it into, it's kind of like a client server architecture, but for mission logic, to where they can dictate this logic runs on the individual server instance and it's got its own local variables, and it can interface with variables and it can interface with functions that are also executed on the back end. And so what this allows us to do is, like I was saying earlier, it's like you can have an individual mission instance of this Xenothread on a given server, and you can register that you did or did not successfully defend this javelin. Did you sufficiently restock it and it left and you were victorious, or did it suffer so much damage that it had to run away? And so we actually tally the number of successful restockings, and then, like I said earlier, that directly impacts how quickly that javelin is going to come support you, assuming you need it in those later stages. And again, the important point there is it's representative. What we've done now is work out the details of the tech, put it into wide operations. You can kind of think of Xenothread as the first use case, and it focused our efforts to get all of all this stuff working. And there is a lot more that you'll be seeing in both the near and farther term. Dynamic events are something that there's going to be continual focus on for the foreseeable future. For example, the next Fleet Week is actually going to be running off of these same fundamental principles. We've got another dynamic event which we're referring to as Nine Tails Lockdown, and it introduces it's not live yet, but we're already well into testing the so-called shop modifiers. We can now have mission logic affect at a global scale, and we've resolved all of the coordination between the different servers and issues like that. So you can now apply shop modifiers. You can apply probability volume modifiers. You can basically lock down areas of space, inhibit quantum travel within them. What will be coming in the not too distant future will be things like, population control, control of the actual spawn managers, things of that sort, access to areas. And you think about this, like, what is Fleet Week other than at a certain time we're going to go ahead and open the doors to a certain area and allow you entrance. And in the case of some of these upcoming events, when those events are active, we want to basically, we've decided as designers that it would be fun if we're doing a Fleet Week event, then we want to increase the demand for party favors and alcohol and fireworks, or whatever other types of commodities temporarily at this location. And so for the duration of this event, we crank up the demand, the price goes higher, we broadcast that information to players, let them know, hey, by the way, the prices in this particular area for these particular commodities are getting out of whack. You might want to take advantage of this temporary opportunity and focus on that. And so all of this is completely new functionality. It's basically you're adding additional paints to what the designers can use to craft these portraits that they're making.
So yes, you now know what the next dynamic event is.
Well, there's going to be. We're just going to be keep rolling them out. We've actually we've probably got 8 or 10 specific ones planned, and like I said, each one is looking to leverage stuff that's come before and then add some new functionality.
Okay. We talked a bit about how with the dynamic events, it now allows cross server progress and stuff like that. The events on one server get tallied up with the events of another server with another server to affect the next phase. You've got the Nine Tails lockdown where we can now dynamically affect the price of shops and stuff like this. One of the things you touched on, and again, I just want to follow up on something you said: no deviation from the existing development. How important?
Not just to be clear, it's not that there's no deviation. It's that you're trying. Basically, we have a long-term plan of things we want to get done, and it logically makes sense to do this before this other piece of tech, etc. And so you don't in general want to deviate too dramatically purely for the sake of an arbitrary event. In other words, if not for Xenothreat, we could have done something else that would also be interesting. Yeah. But it was time in the natural course of things. We needed to basically start getting the back end coordination of these events. We needed to get that operational. We needed to bring the capital ships online. The torpedo stuff is something that's been that's something that's been bothering us for a long time. So all of those things. Now, some of those bits of tech, when we started last year, they weren't going to be addressed for another 6 months, and so we did reprioritize some things. So what I was saying earlier is you don't want to completely upend your logical development schedule, but you certainly refine it, you tweak it, you basically massage things around based upon. So you're kind of like looking for the intersection of what's within your grasp, if not absolutely all going to be there, unless you actually put some focus on it. And then once we kind of lock that down, it becomes a very good means of focusing focusing everyone's attention to where we know exactly how we're going to be using everything from capital ship combat to the shop transactions that we can now have fed back into the mission logic to a vast multitude of other things.
Right. Now you hit exactly what I wanted you to hit there. That these things don't detract or derail from the development. They actually focused in and bear down on things that we already intended to do. They just bring them into a more crystalline focus for a bit. That said, there had to be some concerns. There had to be some dangers inherent. What were some of the things we needed to look out for while we were working? What scared us about this?
The biggest concern from the beginning, I would say, was going to be performance. We knew performance was going to be an issue. It continues to be an issue. We've got a number of initiatives underway to basically improve that. And then we're also attacking it, from a completely different angle, which is not just the per server performance, but the whole server meshing initiative is intended to eventually allow us to distribute the workload over as many servers as we need. And so that was always something that we were aware of. We've basically tweaked and refined things. We, the maximum number of enemies you face. In other words, do you face 50 enemies at once, or do you basically face, a dozen, and we keep replenishing them as you destroy them or take them out, make them flee, basically replenish them, quicker. How many capital ships can we put, at a time? There's been a tremendous amount of focus on optimize everything from turret AI to even seemingly unrelated things like social AI. It's like any time you're saving there is basically additional time that you can inject into into these events that are intended to basically draw lots of players together and have and have an enormous amount of AI active. If you think about it, I mean, this is definitely the biggest such event we've done to date, and we're putting more players and more AI, and you got tons of turrets operation. I mean, you have a lot of stuff happening in one area, and so it's It's like with most things, right? Which is your first iteration of these things is never as mature as you would like in terms of the performance, and we're going to keep refining it. I think you'll see some big improvements over the course of the next few quarters, and we'll go from there.
All right, so we're about halfway through. We are talking with Tony Zurevec, big head honcho guy for the Persistent Universe and Systemic Systems. Remember, if you're watching live on Twitch right now, you can submit questions with the word question in capital letters surrounded by brackets. That's going to help Tyler and our community management team pull those out from the conversations. Remember to try to keep the questions related to the stuff we're talking about today. So if you're asking about when your favorite ship's going to come out or something, that's not really the stuff we take Tony's time with.
I want to take a break there real quick since he's taking a halfway point break. What did you guys think of the thing he talked about when we first came back in? He was talking about how, like when a dynamic event, like he was saying Fleet Week kicks off, how prices of things would go up. I think I saw Meg's face change because she started thinking Double Dog's going to be triple the price now. But with it was interesting. Because I was an Eve player. I don't know, Meg, I know you didn't play Eve, but I know you're familiar with it, Cap. And one of the things that was frustrating with me in Eve was that the economy, even though you have multiple systems, I never really felt like the economy became dramatically impacted by actions or events that took place in the verse, if that makes any sense. It
does. People talk to, who came to games like Elite Dangerous, talked about the dynamism of the background simulation relative to Eve, and I said, because I dipped my foot in and out of Eve, spent a lot of time in Elite, and I would say for all the economy and spreadsheet sort of work that you do in Eve, I can't imagine that it wasn't as dynamic as people would like. And so, to hear Tony talk a little bit about how Fleet Week and events like that would, and to me should, impact local pricing of a variety of things, for me makes sense. It feels like they're having the types of conversations we want them to have, which is, when you live at Atlanta in 1996 and the Olympics come, mm-hmm. what goes up in price?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. And a lot of things do, right?
Yeah.
And so
but let me ask you a question. Do you think that the players have thought about, sometimes we talk about this immersion thing and all this detail and stuff, but I mean, do you think that the players are really, that this is the world that they're actually understanding is being built around them? Because I live in Chicago, Convention City, and it's a shame. Meg, you can go downtown one day and get a hotel and they say it's $225. You come back when there's a convention in town and it's $650. You know what I mean? I mean, do you think that the players are thinking about immersion at that level so that, you've got enough money right now, but when you go to Fleet Week, again, I'm not being funny, Meg, but your Double Dog is no longer, 2 credits, but it's 8 credits or 9 credits. I mean, do you think the players are going to be aware of that being a thing, or it's going over their heads, or they don't even know about it? What do you guys think? Silence.
I don't know. I would love to know like the breakdown of old versus like new players. Because I mean, not even that, but I feel like some people could take the game not as seriously and not think about that, or not even realize, because like still 9 AUEC is nothing to us.
Right.
Because like depending on where the alpha is, money is so easily obtainable.
Right. But you heard like this week they were talking about the ship prices are going to go up, right?
I did hear that.
You know what I mean? So I mean that's like the first step of getting us to understand. And here's the deal. They gave an example, right? I think it was something like an 890 jump was 70 million, some crazy number like that, right? That's 70 million this week. If the raw materials and stuff aren't in, or if the demand for them goes up, their dynamic aspects is saying that the next time you come back 2 months later, for that period of time, maybe at 890 is now 140 million. You know what I mean? So I'm wondering if players are understanding that the rise and fall of the economy, because we've been so used to economies being static. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. How they're going to respond to that when this stuff starts to kick in.
Well, I think any players who have thought at any length about real world or even in-game economies, I think we'll be ready for some dynamism here. I think there's a lot of players who just came to fly ships, and to navigate a lot of this stuff is going to be new to them, and some of them will like it and some of them won't. What I like that they're going for are like fundamental questions. What is the fundamental price to find, mine, refine, and deliver iron and steel? Right? That fundamental number, right, will drive the price of ships. Right? So whatever they set that number to,
right,
then there'll be some multiplier that will lead to that's what it costs to make a hurricane, and that's what it costs to make an 890 gem. That's what it costs to make the big RSI ships. Right. And so you combine that with you should not be able to get, in my view, some people will hate me for saying this, but you should not be able to get an 890 jump in 3 months once the game comes out. Right. That should be a much longer term journey. Right. For people. So
an org ship.
What's that?
I said, or an org ship, like
an org ship.
People are
cracking, something major,
Right. And so, I don't think that most new players, to Meg's point, are necessarily thinking about that. I think longer term players who have paid attention this whole time have heard enough of this from Tony Z and others to know that there is some real level of detail. Like Chris Roberts is going to do this, when he's talking about the best damn universe sim ever. Well, when it comes to economy, that's going to require Tony Z level of detail. So,
you want to say something else, Meg?
I don't think so. I don't know. I remember maybe not the last time, but one of the biggest things that we were revolting about was the claim timers changing suddenly. And they were like so quick to, I don't know why they did it. I wasn't looking into why they changed it, but I remember them rolling it back, like, I don't know if it's like a few days or a week later. So I'm not sure they did it due to complaints or just because like they just wanted to see and they got enough information. But yeah, that I feel like that was a lot of older players as well, just because.
You say old people.
No, I didn't mean like that. Old people to the game.
That's all right. I'm old.
I'm old. Across the deck. That's all right. We'll take it though, Meg. Don't worry.
You talk about me. That's all right.
We still love you. It's all right.
That's right. Right.
Yeah. No, I feel like a lot of people were like what CaptainSeriousFun was saying. Some people are just here to fly ships, yada yada. Like some people don't have the time to wait 3 hours for something, but that is the game. So even me, like I didn't expect things like that to happen or change, or even like these ship prices changing in the future, and that's still like probably tier 2. Like that, like it's still probably going to get deeper and deeper, more expensive, and wait times are going to be longer. And like you were talking about on one episode, armor is going to cost a lot. Things aren't going to be easily obtainable. But I've fallen in love with that idea. I can't lie. A game that's actually going to take you time and potentially teamwork. Yeah, it's going to be awesome. But I definitely think there are a lot of people that are going to hate it. But
and preparation, right? And preparation, and to your point, teamwork that elicits intelligence, right? It's going to be important, I think, to bring it back to the economy, to have an org that is distributed across systems, right? So that you can get the first insight into a price change in some system before it goes up on the ticker, right? Or something like that. And as a result, they reach out to you and go, hey, I'm over in Nix, and the price of X has dropped 20%. And people go, let's move, right? So it will take some of that, I think. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Y'all funny in the chat.
Yeah.
That's how,
they've been
that's how I
taking
feel.
shots all night. Togi been taking shots and imposter. I've been seeing some of this stuff that's been flowing through. Fast Card, they've been throwing some shots, but I ain't gonna start on them this week. So we're gonna keep it rolling here.
Tony, you mentioned that that designers get that designers can use dynamic events for all manner of things. We just showed on ISC how the terrain modification tool will make things easier for designers to craft and alter the surface of planets and stuff. Dynamic events isn't just a feature for players; it's also a tool for our developers and our designers. What are some of the ways that dynamic events can help our designers make better and more dynamic stuff for Star Citizen?
Well, it's like I was saying earlier. What dynamic events really are is what we set up by default is what I would call like the systemic background, right? That's what quantum is good at, which is it's like the real world economy. You know, things ebb and things flow, but in general, you don't have major financial crises or Great Depressions or wars, on a regular basis. But the reality, from a gameplay perspective, is you actually want a little bit of chaos here and there, and sometimes we, the designers, want to go in and specifically massage this. Like, oh, you know what? This area of the solar system has been kind of boring to date. We're going to liven it up. And so what these dynamic events allow us to do is basically to seamlessly integrate a chunk of designer and writer driven content into this background simulations, so that how it interfaces with the the world as it currently exists, it's all logical. It's exactly what you're saying. In other words, for example, if we introduce a horde of pirates at a particular location, well, those pirates, they're going to need fuel, they're going to need ammo, they're going to need ship repairs. All of a sudden, you would expect to basically see lots more missions for escorts of transport ships in that area. You'd see more bounties being bounty service beacons being dispatched to that area. So you have all of these other logical knock-on effects you would like, and those they get for free. But you think about it, it's like in Xenothreat, there's all this custom dialogue and stuff geared towards this, and you got to go record the specific lines and trigger them up. So it's basically what I would describe as the best of both worlds, which is it's a big open world, and you can do whatever you want and make whatever choices you want, and the game will respond logically. And if you're particularly clever, you'll occasionally ferret out some cool opportunities. And then at the same time, whether we manually do it or whether on occasion Quantum decides, there's been so much battling in this area that we're going to go ahead and activate a compatible dynamic event that says, oh, well, and so the way these things are configured is you can think of it a bit like a programming function, to where they've got certain requirements, certain inputs that have to be fed to them. And so what the system is basically looking for is at any given time is for the inputs in any given area, what kind of content does it have that it can match up? And so I mentioned like dynamic events, but there's a middle layer to this, which is, so heretofore today, you've had the normal, what I'd call the static missions. Mm-hmm. And then at the far end of the spectrum, you've got these dynamic events. And in between, you've actually got what I've always referred to as dynamic missions. And dynamic missions, they kind of split the difference to where they're going to be systemically generated all over the place. You constantly see them. They'll look very much like right now, if you're in an area and there's a high probability of pirates, we actually create a pirate encounter mission, or we create a cargo transport ship mission, a conflict, or whatever the case may be. Where what dynamic missions do is basically allow us at a smaller, more localized scale. Now we're not talking about trying to coordinate this across multiple servers or anything like that. It's just that cargo ship that you run into in this area of space, what type of cargo should it have? Should it be copper? Should it be platinum? Should it be aluminum? It probably depends. Logically, it would depend upon, well, is it coming from from an area where it purchased those things, where that stuff is mined, refined, et cetera, and where is it going to? And so if it's heading one direction, if the cargo transport is going from the refinery to the factory, then you would expect that it's going to be loaded with goods that the refinery produces. And if the cargo ship is headed towards the refinery, then it likely has raw ore that needs to be processed, et cetera. And so the point being, designers don't need to, with the dynamic mission system, they don't need to fill in things like, hey, for this cargo transport mission, What kind of cargo, does it have? Should it be beat up or should it be in pristine condition? Should it have fighter escorts or should it just be traveling solo? Should it basically be a derelict husk in space that you stumble upon, or should it basically be in perfectly fine pristine condition? So these all become inputs to these setups. So the designers set up the archetypes and the system fills in the inputs, and what you wind up getting is an exponential increase in variety, because all of a sudden designers aren't trying to hard code every single specific instance. And so you can think of dynamic events as it's really just an evolution of that system that adds on some additional back end coordination and those modifiers that I talked about earlier, to where dynamic events really they grant the designer the temporary capability to nudge certain things in the simulation a particular way. Whether it be new items added to a shop's inventory, whether it be additional demand for an item at a particular shop, whether it be missions that are going to be offered here, all of those sorts of things. And so I mentioned like population control. You can see a fleet week in the future will be a dynamic event. And when that event's going on, we're going to turn the dial and crank up the population. We're going to wind up doubling it, because you'd expect to see a lot of people coming to see that show. And then when the event dissipates, then we'll basically turn that dial back down. The population will, recede back to its normal levels. In other words, it's a special event that we've come in. We've added a ton of custom content, NPC conversations, all this stuff geared towards that. And so we kind of view it as one big comprehensive designer-driven package that can be merged with all of this, this back-end systemic, background.
I'm sorry, I got distracted. There was an ASCII art of Tyler wearing a American top hat thing. It was weird. You mentioned that there's the systemic triggers, the things that that can trigger all these things by just meeting criteria, and then the manual triggers. Some of the folks in the chat are asking if the manual triggers are akin to like the old GM events that you would see in older MMOs, where a design, in this case a designer as opposed to a GM, can come in and just create a one-time event that would occur.
That's exactly it. And some of these will be one time, like the Zenith Thread or a particular Fleet Week or other ones will basically just add to our library of things, that we can activate simply because we want it to liven up the place. The Nine Tails, I don't want to go into, the Nine Tails, I don't want to go into like the detail, because there's some cool stuff that we'll be introducing that players haven't, that they haven't really seen before. So I want to kind of keep some of it under wraps. But it's very representative of some of the bits of functionality that we're introducing in there will then be exploited in more dramatic fashion in subsequent dynamic events. Like one high level example would simply be the Nine Tail stuff is kind of geared towards a certain area, basically being locked down as a result of aggression. And in the future, what we're going to wind up having is, if the player community doesn't beat back that particular threat, then it will grow, and all of a sudden you've got 2 or 3 or 4 different areas locked down. In other words, you the player community, have to respond and tamp out this fire, or else it will gradually grow. Now, it's possible, of course, depending upon how we set it up and what the current inputs, it's like the NPC population in some cases may eventually respond sufficiently to do it. But you get the overall effect, which is this one event that's geared towards locking down an area. The area to be locked down is an input, and we can feed it 1, we can feed it 3, we can basically add a little bit of back-end logic controls, and then then which ones are locked down can be replicated across all of the servers. So the community as a whole is fighting just like they are in Zenith Thread against this common threat.
Gotcha. So that I'm just going to do this for clarity's sake. A lot of the folks have been asking whether Xenothreat specifically is a one-time event, you play it and it's never back, or whether it may come back. I know from internal conversations we're reserving our options there, whether Xenothreat's going to be a one-time thing or it's going to come back. But we have the option, though. That's the important part for this conversation, is that we can do these one-time limited events that occur in Star Citizen's history, and when they're done, they never return ever again. Or we can do ones that are recurring, or we can do ones that build upon each one, where it's like this is a one-time thing, but it leads into another event X number of months later, leads into another event X number of months later, and that's how we start adding a persistent and long-form storyline to the Persistent Universe.
Yeah, this one, the Xenothreat is basically, attacking, harassing the UE, and you're there to basically help, beat back, some of the specific challenges to basically salvage material, to restock the Javelin, defend transport ships, to the same effect, all this type of stuff. In the future, there may very well be ones where you actually have to go into, occupied space, so it's really dangerous to get there, infiltrate bases, retrieve stuff, bring it back, and then what we'd be measuring is well, how much total information or assets or stolen ships that you've retrieved, etc. How many have has the community pulled back? And again, I keep referring to like the community because in general these dynamic events are meant to be things that apply across the entire spectrum of servers and not isolated onto a just one individual instance. If you're talking about just an individual server instance, then you're really talking more of like I was saying earlier with like the dynamic missions, to where if it's all on one server, then you don't need all this back-end coordination and variable maintenance and phases and all that. You can literally just run it with your normal subsumption mission logic.
Just looking at some of the questions from the live chat here. Some of these we've touched on, but we'll go ahead and ask them just for clarity's sake. As far as the size of dynamic events, are they limited in scope until Quanta is fully on board and up and running, or will they always just be some of them smaller, some of them massive? Is there a scale you have in mind?
But it's actually exactly it's both. It's like some of them will be really large, like Xenothreat, and it puts the whole solar system theoretically under threat. Others will be much more localized. That is like our first test, like for this Nine Tails lockdown. It's much more localized. It's a threat to a specific landing zone. So if you have no interest in that particular landing zone and the shops that have been cut off from the world and aren't able to get the supplies that they need, and therefore they're all calling out for help and the price is going through the roof, what they'd pay to get medical supplies and all this other stuff, then you can largely ignore it. And so the idea is, again, it's like we're building a library, and we'll have big invasion, fleet invasions of a solar system, smaller things, which is just a particular pirate gang assaulting a particular landing zone. We'll have infiltration stuff. It's really, again, it's like you're aiming to get the tools to allow the designers to basically express solutions to all of these dramatically different scenarios.
Now, we've mentioned Quantum and Quanta whatnot several times during the show. For folks who have been watching, I'm looking at the chat here, that don't know what we're talking about, there is a nice hour-long presentation available on our YouTube page from CitizenCon 2949, where Tony introduced the entire concept of Quanta. We don't want to waste our remaining minutes here just regurgitating what's already been shared. That said, it has been more than a year since we've heard about it, since we've heard from you. I know we have that presentation coming in the next X number of months. Without spoiling that, can you give us a bit of an update on how things have been progressing, whether you're happy with where we're at right now?
Yeah, it's come a long way. All the TypeScript logic has been redone in C# for the AI, which basically resulted in somewhere in the range of 3 order of magnitude increase. So we can basically easily simulate several million quanta, and we can do that at multiples of normal speed. And that's important because we need to be able to tweak certain levers, let the simulation run for an hour, and then see how stuff kind of balanced out and what kind of limits we hit on certain things. Did prices ever get too out of whack here? Was did the offering price for a particular mission ever get completely ridiculous given these parameters that we'd set up? We're in the final stages now of starting to connect Quantum to some of the back-end services so that they're actually feeding data from the simulation to the services. The services have long been feeding that information then to the actual game servers, and then basically receiving it back. Like one of the most recent examples here is and it's kind of related to the dynamic event shop modifier stuff, which is the potential to add items, add new items to a particular shop. So right now that inventory has always historically been fixed. And so now with the modifier, since we can add something, it's the same thing you'll see in Quantum, which is shops may occasionally change some of their inventory items. And so it turns out that there's a little bit of work we need to do on the game server in order to support that. There's been a lot of focus on basically getting extracting chunks of information from the service beacons that we demonstrated before. We were generating the events, but they weren't actually making their way to the back end. So that information will be filtering up. In other words, where you see calls for assistance, calls for combat assistance for you to come, will in the not too distant future be dictated via that quantum simulation. The price of fuel will be dictated by how much of a load there is in that particular area. And all of these things take time because the previous iteration we showed of quantum, as you got all these quanta going around, they didn't have at that time any concept of fuel or efficiency in terms of what ship they were flying and how much fuel it consumed. They basically got transport for free, and so a lot of those kind of things are being wrapped up. We spent relatively recently a good bit of time getting Quantum, the service, to actually basically be built and shipped with the game. So we're not currently exploiting it, but it's there right alongside a litany of all these other services. So that piece, which was a significant effort, is now in and done. And basically what that means is we've got the basic elements of plumbing to get all this information going back and forth. And what we're focused on right now is actually is realizing some of that stuff.
Let me stop there real quick. I don't know. Have you guys noticed? I mean, this was 3 years ago. This was 2021 when this video came out. I had made some notice of some things, and there's something he said in the video in particular that I did notice. Did you guys notice when we were at IAE this year that there were tons of NPCs there at the convention center?
Yep.
Which in previous years was not the case. There was like those little sprinklings of folks there, but I mean, it was literally crowds in certain areas. Were you going to say,
Well,
man?
I felt like IAE was a line in the sand for that, because I've seen increased NPC presence since then as well in lots of different places. Now, sometimes they cluster underneath the big ball in our corp and they do weird stuff, but there have been more NPCs broadly. And Griff, you pointed out the other night something that you had been saying was happening recently, which is more of these spawn closets that had not been opened before are now open as well. So,
what were you going to say, Meg?
I don't know if it has to do with this, but I also noticed that they were making comments at IAE as well, which is really cool.
Yeah.
That's right.
This whole thing with the dynamic events and Quanta has been on the table with the players now a lot, because the idea of the living, breathing universe, we know a lot of that. Even though we're running around as human players, we also know that the NPCs are vital to that. And for those of you who don't know what Cap was talking about, was that over the past couple months, we had been noticing, several of us who play at night, that there were spawn closet doors that were opening. Some of you all have probably seen them. Doors that have been closed for years, particularly at the spaceports. These doors are all of a sudden opening up, or there's a crowd of people standing in front of a door that's open. And we were wondering whether there was some back-end quiet testing that was going on that they're starting to do with this. I've never seen anybody walking in and out of those doors, but I have seen a crowd that are standing there, and these doors are open. You see it definitely at, I don't know about Hurston, but I know definitely at Microtech, where you do your kiosk checkout, the back door on the back wall opens up. Same thing happens at RCorp, between where the kiosks used to be and where they are now, and you walk down a little corridor, and actually even coming in from the tram. And so I've been wondering whether or not there's been any testing in this area of Quanta and Quantum. But I really want to highlight the thing about the population, and noticing that he's talking about Fleet Week in particular. that, it's not just the fact that prices go up, but that also the population goes up, right? Because we show up there, NPCs show up there, and later on we're going to talk about some pros and cons on, my ideas about Invictus Fleet Week anyway. But I just want to see if anybody had any thoughts about that. We've got just about 10 minutes left on this, and we're going to 12 minutes, and we're going to be done with this. So let's wrap it up.
Star Citizen, we've got the plumbing. If we plug Tony Z into the servers, would they go faster? I'm imagining, like, remember Superman 3, where the gal gets plugged into the servers? Let's see what else we got. Will some of the dynamic events allow us to choose sides if we're more into the outlaw phase? Xenothreat has everybody on one side, right?
But it's not really. I mean, you're encouraged to be on one side, and yet plenty of players are electing to basically, they're not able to ally, with the Xenothreat, but they're certainly not being, friends to the local security forces. So yes, we've actually got, some of that stuff, like in the Nine Tails lockdown, we're starting to play with some of those concepts to where you can basically work on the side of the guys helping to keep it locked down, or you can basically work on the side of the guys trying to break that blockade and basically, free that area. So
the fact that there isn't a way to officially plug in with the other side in Xenothreat isn't indicative of some future design direction. It's just that's not what this one was.
Not at all. In fact, it's actually quite the opposite, because as is always the case with Star Citizen, and you see this with so many things that we did with Xenothreat, right? Like with Xenothreat, we kind of started out with, okay, we're gonna have we're gonna have capital ships. So any player with bombers, they're set. And then the concern was, wait, a lot of players don't have bombers. How are they going to contribute? What if I've got a Hornet? And so we introduced the concept of, great, we'll have a lot of support, light fighters supporting these ships, and you can win. You can basically make the Idris, retreat, and therefore, win that battle simply by taking out all those light fighters. And so all of a sudden now it's like, regardless of which, whether you've got the heavy bomber, whether you've got the light fighter, you can contribute. But that still left the problem of, well, what if I'm not the kind of player that wants to do tons and tons of endless ship combat? What do I get to do in this Xenothreat thing? And that's where that's where we started thinking, hey, let's have this whole salvage aspect where the javelins come in, you're basically restocking them. So now someone's got to go out and basically get the materials. And of course, we got to have a little bit of FPS combat, on that. But then all of a sudden, that forces you into that FPS mode. So we start looking and thinking, what if I actually do like the ship combat, but I want to be able to contribute to the restocking and not be forced into that. Well, you've got transport ships going back and forth, and on occasion you'll be asked to defend them. And if you successfully defend them, you basically wind up generating as much restocking benefit as if you were to fully salvage one of those derelict ships. And so the point I'm making is regardless of what exactly you want to do, what you find interesting, we try as much as possible to make sure that there's going to be a sufficient diversity of interesting things to do, such that you'll have a good time. And so right at the very top of that list would be, sure, a lot of players are going to, on occasion, want to be able to play the part of the bad guy. Some other players will want to, play the part of the good guy. And, some players, like if you think about, without going into too much detail on the Nine Tails, lockdown, when you're actually trying to deliver those supplies, are you trying to simply to take out all of the pirates in that area, basically remove the threat, or are you basically just trying to transport goods in and basically take advantage of the sky-high prices that are temporarily being paid because no one else can get through that blockade? And then if you're one of those guys trying to transport those goods through, all of a sudden there's a real need for you to hire via service beacon, hire other people to protect you. And so you've got escort potential. You got you can basically be the guys helping to lock it down. You can be the guy helping to eliminate, the threat. There's many different ways to come at at this particular situation, depending upon what interests you. And that is ultimately, where we're trying to go all across the game.
Yeah. Plugins for players in different professions and who play different ways, for people who just prefer the FPS aspects, things for them to do, for the people who prefer ship combat, for the people who prefer shipping, stuff like that. That said, there have been a number of questions about drilling down to other specific aspects. You just talked about making sure there's something for almost everybody in all these things. But on the flip side, would we ever consider, because PvP is quite important for a lot of folks, who play Star Citizen, would we ever consider a PvP specific dynamic event, or a dynamic event that has no combat at all?
Well, the PvP stuff is something you always. I mean, if you're going to have freedom, some people are going to basically want to get in there and muck it up for other people. And so the way that I would aim to address that type of stuff is basically, within the rules of the system. In other words, that was why. And again, we're still in the early stages of the whole prison thing. That's why we have a prison concept, which is you can be a bad guy, and if you get caught, then you basically go, you go serve your sentence. And right now, when I say the early stages, I mean like right now, escaping from prison equates to walking through, a hole in the wall, and basically assuming you actually know the escape route, then it's just a matter of time. And that's another thing that we've got a few quarters out to basically do a major revision to make. The entire process of escaping prison is going to be a challenge in and of itself, and there's going to be multiple ways. It's like, are you talking about basically bribing guards? Are you talking about coordinating with other players? Are you talking about being the guy that's simply trying to avoid the cameras and do the whole time thing? Setting up distractions. Setting a fire in the utility closet to basically draw the guards over so you can go over here. In other words, how many different ways can we support? Such that a player can feel as if they've crafted their own particular solution to the problem. And as much as possible, you don't try to hard code these things, right? You try to basically create a number of different systemic elements, and what will inevitably wind up happening is players will find clever ways to exploit them to particular effect. We're actually seeing this right now. It was a bit of a headache in this morning's meeting when I was talking about the Xenothreat stuff. We were going through PvP, and apparently, some players have figured out this super clever way of very quickly, sharing credits and getting out of prison, etc. And it's always the case, right? Which is it's an ongoing battle. When you provide a bunch of these raw elements, people will find unintended ways of basically accomplishing their effect. And I personally have always loved that, because that was always my favorite thing in games, was being able to craft not what I felt was my own unique solution. In other words, what I didn't want to do is expend copious amounts of time trying to figure out the one solution that the designer dictated would solve this particular puzzle. I'd rather give players a bunch of these logical elements, and they can string them together in all sorts of ways. And I kind of referenced that, just briefly earlier, like with the prison guard, which is, well, if prison guards respond as they must to audible events, then if you can do something that that generates a noise over here, then of course they should go to investigate. And so a clever player would basically say, hey, I can the same way that they'd go investigate a noise, and that would become a problem for you if you're trying to infiltrate an area, can actually become a great means for you to temporarily distract them so that you can get through a door to escape the prison, etc. And so all of this stuff, I mean, it comes back to the same thing, which is giving players the freedom to basically play the game how they want, and having the system push back in logical fashion. So if we don't want a lot of player versus player, stuff in this area, then we should bring logical elements of the game, more security, larger, penalties in that particular area, things of that sort to discourage it. It's still possible, but all of a sudden, I wouldn't aim to reduce it to zero or to make it impossible, because impossible to me is never particularly fun. I'd rather make it so that if you want to basically accept the consequences of your actions, then more power to you. And in some places those consequences will be fairly minimal. In other places they'll be quite large. And you see this across the law system, where we've got 40 different infractions, and some things are viewed as a minor little infraction. You basically pay a fine. Other things actually lock you into prison. And right now, like I said, it's fairly easy to escape prison. It won't be in the future. That will actually become a much more significant challenge.
So it sounds like the approach that we will generally take is a try to plug as many different groups and peoples and play styles into these events as possible. Try to provide something for as many play styles as we can, including PvP.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and PvP is just you always have to be sensitive to it because a small number of players can always ruin the experience for a lot of other people, and so you do have to put a significant amount.
That's not PvP though.
Yeah, but how are you going to deal with that? And certainly, there are some aspects, to where you take, administrative, action. But in general, to me, if you have to take administrative action, it usually signifies that you failed at something within the game, right? It's like in the real world, if I go out and I wreak havoc, there will be very real and obvious consequences that you quickly suffer, and it should be the same thing in a game to where you can do it, but you better be extremely clever about how you go about it, or else the system's going to respond in logical fashion.
All right, well, Tony, that's it. We made it to the end. You got anything else you wanna leave people with? Any final thoughts before Xenothreat, our first dynamic event, makes its way to the live servers sometime?
No, other than just if you haven't watched, we talked about the quantum stuff. For people that aren't familiar with it, they don't necessarily need to go back and watch that thing, since we will be doing a relatively comprehensive update. It won't be as singularly focused on that because there's several other areas that I want to cover in at least brief fashion. Virtual AI and and a number of other things. It's probably, like I said, a few months out, give or take, and we're hoping to be able to show some concrete examples of how some of this some of this technology is actually now integrated into the game.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Tony. If the folks in the chat had their way, you do this once a month, every month for the rest of your life. But I understand that you actually have a job.
Ironically, if we did that, then there'd be less to discuss. You wouldn't get as much done. So.
There would, and you wouldn't. So yeah. So thank you so much. I'll let you get back to work. Everybody watching, thank you so much for tuning in. This has been Star Citizen Live, Dynamic Events with Tony Zurovec. I'm Jared Huckabee. Tune in on Thursday of next week to check out an ISC all about how we brought those capital ship battles into the Precision universe and the work that went into that, and what's next for them in the future. And then we'll be right back here with another Star Citizen Live next Friday. So take care, everybody.
Yeah. So real quick, gang, just as a reminder, this was from 3 years ago, from 2021. This was not a new video from Tony Zurovec, but we did want to go back and lay some groundwork for how we got to where we are in relation to dynamic events. And I see you guys are saying global events, and yeah, I guess you could say global too, even though definition for global is worldwide, but I guess we could say universe wide if we want to use that too. But I do think that they are trying to, I think dynamic is important to understand in the sense of how these events happen, what launches them, what makes them start. So let's do something real quick here. Let me see if you guys got any initial reaction to what you saw. I'm going to go back to Meg first on this, and then after that we're going to break down the events that we currently have. So Meg, was there anything in particular that out of everything we saw here that stuck with you? You're muted.
I'm so sorry. His explanation of how there are multiple ways things could get done was fantastic. Didn't even think about that. And then them even considering PvP and trying to safeguard people who are events that are supposed to be PvE. I just thought that those things were interesting, but I don't have anything else.
That idea of inclusion, of making sure that even at an event that might be very combat heavy, that there are roles that people, who may not be great at a turret, or great as an ace pilot, but I mean, it's just as crucial to have that person that's helping you haul cargo out, like you were talking about the different types of cargo that have to be handled a certain way. There are some people who are cool with that. You know what I mean? They'll ride in the transport. They don't necessarily have to be the person that flies in their Antares or something, right? The fact that they do want to make events that if people want to participate, they can find an area that they feel comfortable in. And maybe they'll graduate to being a great fighter later on. But the fact that they can kind of step into an event and not feel like they're left out. It may not happen in every event, but the fact that they're aware of it, I agree with you, I think is a good thing. Cap, what about you? Anything?
Yeah, I think his emphasis on consequences via systems was a refreshing reminder that, what we're focused on here is the weight of choice right? And that making choices and having consequences is gameplay.
Yeah.
And to build out a system that makes sure that, you know, whatever you choose, there will be ramifications. Just a reminder that systemically that's being built in is, for me, remains very important. So I'm glad he said it.
Yeah. And to be able to keep players playing, you know, keep it within the context of gameplay, right? Not that, like he said, it has to get to a level where it's at the administrative level. I mean, obviously, if there's something really egregious, we understand that, but that shouldn't be the automatic response to things that happen in the game. He's saying, let's develop a game that within the game world creates its own consequences and makes the player think twice, like buying that double dog. You know, do I need to buy my double dogs?
You can't eat but so many.
2 weeks. Yeah, do I need to buy my double dogs 2 weeks before Invictus, or do I just wait and splurge the money? But no, I mean, again, it is great to think about it. Oh, let's check out Royce Darby with that meme. I love it. Okay, in the chat. Okay. Yeah.
And it goes all the way back. And if you know Tony Zervik's history, it goes all the way back to the work he did like in Ultima, right? Where, you know, he worked on the NPC logic and stuff in Ultima 7, the Black Gate.
The Black Gate. Oh, yeah. Wow.
And
you really went back.
You know, NPCs had to react.
Yeah.
Right. And if you behaved badly, they would, you know, party members might leave the group. They might attack you. He's been thinking about consequence.
Yeah.
On the system side for a long time.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, let's take a quick look at some videos, gang. You know, we're going to show you guys just some trailers that CIG has put together, introducing each one of these. I am going to throw one in here that, you know, we may not look at as a dynamic event, but it is an event that CIG does launch, and it's the very first one we got. That actually started out as something that the players introduced, and that's Jumptown. But we've also seen Jumptown evolve, and we know that there are those times where Jumptown comes into the game. At first, it used to always be at one location at Yela, and since then it has now grown, it's expanded, it's at different locations. So let's take a quick look at that, and then we'll come back with some commentary on it.
Take me back to the river, wash away my sin. Take me back to the river, Lord, won't you help me find my way back home.
Boy, it doesn't seem like it was that long ago. 316. Jeez, oh Pete. I'm keep picking on Meg tonight. I'm gonna let her go first. Meg, some thoughts on Jumptown 2.0, especially because you weren't around when the original Jumptown came out, were you?
Not when it came out, but when it was available. Yeah.
Okay.
I was here for like the
other iterations of it.
Too. Yeah.
Okay. How do you feel about it now? Good and bad. What's your good and bad about Jumptown?
I don't really think there's anything bad. I think if you're uneducated, then it's going to be a bad time. But otherwise, you pretty much know it's never safe. Don't trust anybody. If you're going to go alone, GGs, like you can get in there and you can wreck shop, but there's no telling if your ship's going to be outside when you leave. So you just have to like consider what your goal is in going there, which I think is fun because you really can't just roll up and ruin everyone's day and not need an exit strategy. Like you go there to die. You're ready to die. I personally only ever like to go with like a huge crew and just take it over, and only fight the people that are trying to kill us, and just let people get their maze. But yeah, I think it's a great event.
Let me ask you before I go to Cap, what's your ship of choice to take to Jumptown when you're ready to haul stuff out? Oh, you go in fighting. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right, I got you. Cap, what about you? Pros and cons on Jumptown.
So yeah, Jumptown is a reigniting of the drug war.
Okay.
Right. So it's supposed to be a problem over there. Right. So one of the things I like about that is that very often it is a problem. Right. And so people will get on the server and go, oh, Jumptown's hot. It's supposed to be hot.
Yeah.
These are illegal drugs. Right. I do like, to Meg's point, when sometimes you'll see, again, choice and consequence, right? You'll see some folks come in, and sometimes it happens when an org takes control, air and ground, and sometimes it just happens organically. You'll go over there, there's a conga line at the dispensary, right? And you look around and you go, I didn't see anybody controlling the space when I came in. This is just people have decided we're gonna just against game theory, against the prisoner's dilemma, against all of that sentiment. They just decided that they were going to decide to trust the person that was in front of them, right?
Yeah.
Now, when Death of a Spaceman becomes more consequential, we'll see, right? But that I like that sometimes you go over there and it's just everybody's rocking and rolling, and sometimes you go over there and it's like that, and it's reflective of individual players and groups of players making different choices.
Yeah. I've had both. I've shown up and there's the conga line and everybody's just got, they've got like one hand on their pistol and the other hand is moving stuff. It's like, as long as nobody acts a fool, we can all make money right now, right? And then there's the time when the conga line's coming and somebody just decides to throw a grenade in and start some chaos, right? I mean, it's happened in so many different ways. It is fun in the sense of the unpredictability of what the outcome could be. Because to your point, Meg, you just never know when you go over there what the deal's going to be. Now, here's my negatives about it, and this is like not really a bad, because they've done this, but as I mentioned earlier, it used to always be at the same location all the time, so you knew where to go. But the fact that now they've made it where it pops up at different locations, I want them to expand that even more. It shouldn't be a matter of it's at one of these three places. It should be now it pops up wherever the frick it pops up at, because then it's going to change the dynamics. And the reason why I'm saying that is because if you're somebody who happens to base yourself out of a certain planet, let's say that planet happens to be Crusader. Well, if it always happens over at Yellow or Daymar, then you're always in proximity. I want it to pop up everywhere, just different places. Some weird remote place that pops up that literally is, because got some places that look abandoned, they look kind of beat up. Let it pop up there. I just love the fact that the unpredictability of it, and I want them to continue to expand, and I'm sure they will. You know what I mean? We had to start out at baby steps, first at one place, then three places, but I want them to continue to expand that.
Right.
Okay.
I agree.
All right, let's take a look at the next one here. Let's go from Jumptown to we talked about this a little bit, Xenothreat.
Attention, people of Stanton. A great injustice has been done to you. For decades, the spineless bureaucrats of your government have been selling you and your fellow citizens piece by piece to the alien scum outside our borders and to their corporate masters within. Their greed, only matched by the absolute disregard for the values that made humanity great in the first place. My brothers and sisters have watched them feed on the dying carcass of the Empire for long enough. With the passage of the Human Xi'an Trade Initiative, it's clear that the government is happy to sell the final parts of humanity into servitude. The time has come to send a message that we will not consume their lives anymore, that we are the ones in charge. Stanton will be the first step in a revolution to take back the soul of the Empire. You will be witnesses. We are Xenothreat. Out.
Xenothreat. We are Xenothreat. I'll go to you, Cap, this time on this one. Feedback on Xenothreat, good, bad? What are your thoughts on it?
I mean, listen, I like the fact that I like it. This is my favorite event. I like that it seemed to have sprung from the conversation where everybody ain't gonna like hanging out with other aliens. Everybody ain't gonna like that. There's gonna be people who don't like that. There's gonna be people who don't like that in a very visceral way. What would that look like, right? And then an event emerges that allows you to challenge that. You know, I know that there's we saw a small, I can't remember if it's small to meaningful, but we saw a presence of Xenothreat also in Pyro, right? And so, you know, the idea that they're moving back and forth between Stanton and Pyro to execute operations makes sense to me. And I like taking these fools out every chance I get, right? Because I believe in beloved community even across alien lines.
You're gonna get Lefty worked up. Lefty's in the chat. You're gonna get them all fired. Him and Togi, they're gonna be both all fired up now.
Listen, Togi, Lefty, and I can go all shoot Van Duel to the day is long, right? Because they proved that they need that. But you know, the Xi'an, you know, listen, come on, let's lean in.
Okay.
So I mean, they need to tell us who the Kurthak are, but other than that, let's lean in. And so I enjoy Xenothreat a lot. Again, we talked about it earlier, but the stages of the event, there's lots of different things to do across the event. Tony Z talked about how people who maybe they don't want to do the pew-pew, do they have something to do in the event? And they thought about it. And so I think that Xenothreat reflects good next iteration thinking from CIG, and it's an enjoyable event when it runs. When the server isn't buggy, it's a good event.
Meg, how about you?
Yeah, I share pretty much the same opinion on it. Yeah, I definitely think I would say it's a fact that it's the best event, just because of how many steps there are and how detailed it is. Like I was explaining at the beginning, you can't just brain dead walk in there. People will, and they'll cause the mission to fail or close to failing if you're not reading the instructions or know what cargo box you're picking up and putting into a ship. If you're just like, oh, we need to get all of these out, and then it's like, okay, you're sure we only have the ones that can quantum, right? And then they blow up and all that cargo is lost. Which is something we don't have with Siege or Jumptown. So, yeah, I think again, like my only downside is that, and there's PvP, which is great for those people, but which is normally like manageable for people who just enjoy PvE.
Right.
But yeah, the only downside is how little it worked last time. Which I don't. How often do they bring Xenothreat back? I haven't seen it since that.
It's been
last
a little
time.
bit now. Yeah, I don't.
Yeah, but
know.
That was really bad. But like that bad was just really sad because it is my favorite event. I know it's a lot of people's favorite event. So hopefully that comes back and it's good and working. But yeah.
You know, one of the things I want to say about these events too, gang, is as a reminder to all of us, including myself, that you know, Stanton is our testing ground still. And sometimes the game feels so good and feels so great that we subconsciously look at it as, oh, this is it, or this is done. But what we play and what we do right now is for a much bigger picture than what we're seeing now. So Xenothreat is not about Stanton. This is going to be something that is about a group that definitely is out against this whole dynamic of the UEE, and that they can pop up anywhere later on. It's not just them coming into what we have, this little system that we have right now. So, keep that in mind, that it's not restricted to, Stanton or the things that we're doing right now, but these events are, you heard Tony say earlier, they've got like 8 to 10 other, dynamic events they want to introduce, but this is a part of lore, and hopefully we'll see it grow and expand, just like how we saw Jumptown do that. I'm hoping that the same thing happens with Xenothreat. And then last but not least, we're going to talk about one other dynamic event, which is Siege.
Hey, happy birthday! Oh my god! We're under attack. Security's been overrun. Please, help us.
Here's the situation. Ninetales attacks these commercial platforms. Gather any gear you need and help us take them back.
Okay. Siege. This last patch, in 3.22, there was a lot of testing going on in the PTU and the test preview channel and everything on Siege. I will say this for me, when we went into Siege, the first time we had a little bit of difficulty. The second time we went, though, we got all the way through the entire mission. And the thing, we saw definite improvements in the AI. We didn't have what we had previously. I think, Cap, you remember we had people that were stuck in the floor, in the wall, spawn closets, all types of stuff. This last time we did it, everything worked well. It did not bug out on us till the very end. We completed the mission. We were headed back in the shuttle, and then our shuttle froze in space between going back to Cloud View, and we had to log out basically. But it did run well. It was a challenge. We were in there for like 3 hours. It was amazing. We had a great time. That is the only time that I've done it and everything went well. Since then, we've had issues pop up, and I can talk about my issues. One of them in particular that's happened to us twice is we would go in there, and we had a red flag last time when we were on our way over in the tram. We never did hear from Bendo Rin. At least I didn't. Some other people did. And we were in the game about maybe 15, 20 minutes. We were on Hardmore, the second platform. And then all of a sudden, everybody's screen went black and everybody woke up in prison. And that happened to us twice. And what we think happened is that we knew there was a team ahead of us and that they completed the mission. And you know how it gives you that thing of saying you need to leave? Well, none of us see that message. So we still think we should keep pushing forward because it was telling us to continue on to the administrative platform. So we think that what happened is we didn't get that message to evacuate, and that timer hit, and then we all got sent to prison. And that happened to us 2 times identically. Everybody's screen goes black. Everybody wakes up at Klesher, and it's like, wow. So, Meg, I'm gonna go to you first on this one. Siege of Orison, got some thoughts?
Yeah, it's definitely my second favorite event. Just because I thoroughly enjoy FPS, and it is great to have the teamwork. There is PvP that is possible in this event, and I honestly don't hate it. Adds a little bit more to it than just shooting the NPCs. I will say doing this when the server FPS is high is near impossible, but like still very fun. Just because again, like I don't enjoy just speed running through things.
Yeah.
Right.
And I do that a lot in games. In this game, I'd like to not be able to do that. And I feel like, of course, you can't always have the best server FPS, but when there is really good server FPS, it makes for a really great event. Yeah, definitely. Not even just this time that they've launched up Siege. Many times they've had issues. I think just with the towers in general, they're just really touchy, and I think they did some changes and they've gotten better, but they've definitely got room to grow.
Have the AI been challenging for you? Do you feel like that has stepped up, or do you feel the AI is still a little on the dumb side for you?
No, they're really. I think like the dumb side is just when the server FPS is low.
Right.
So when it's like, I don't know what the minimum is, but
when you get a good server, they're tough, right?
Yeah, it's almost impossible. Like you've got to slow down and know what you're doing. Kind of gives you the Xeno threat vibes. Like you can't just jump in there and fly to admin. Like a lot of people were doing before.
We had a couple people who said that they couldn't, that normally they go over there naked. They said they can't do it naked anymore.
Yeah. I'm one of those people. I couldn't even do it fully armored. I had 2 med guns on my hip. Did nothing. I needed to immediately go back with my tier 1. So yeah. I definitely think, okay. My actual downside, which is probably stupid to even say just because I understand we need actual hospitals to heal tier 1s, but we used to be able to heal those in the medical beds. I think it would be awesome to have maybe a hospital where we could transport to. Maybe like there is a shuttle that takes us there from each, what's it called? Each like tower section.
Platform. Yeah,
platform. The ability to take a certain shuttle at each platform to get to a hospital instead of needing to go all the way back and then come all the way back. Like, but that's just part of the game. Like, we can't just
let me share something
easier,
with
like
you
I said, but
did happen, Meg. Admiral, I'm getting all my titles mixed up here. Admiral Kusanagi found out something that we didn't know. I don't know if you remember before, you couldn't take a ship out of that zone. Eventually the ship would disappear on you. He flew all the way back to Cloudview. And so I'm thinking that it would be at least cool, like if you made it to, Ardmore, you know, that if you got those injured, that you could throw them into like one of those Pisces and fly back, and come right back. That even if you could do that, that would be something. Because when you take the shuttle, it takes forever. It only took a few minutes.
That zone is tricky.
Yeah, because flying in your own ship, it only takes a few minutes to get back and forth. But if you're doing shuttle to shuttle and then having to run through the fire to come back, you're right. It's a pain to do all that. You know. Yeah, that's a good point. Cap, what about you? Siege of Orson. I've watched you run through. I've watched you limp through. What's been your feelings about going through there?
One of the good things, thanks Meg for extending your thoughts there, allow me to get some chips in. One of the good things, I don't think that Siege for me is as far from Xenothreat as it sounds like it is for Meg. Like, for both of us, Xenothreat's a clear number one. I feel like Siege could be right there with Xenothreat with a few changes. I think y'all are a lot more generous to the AI with Great Server FPS than I am. What I'm seeing with Great Server FPS are dudes with C-54s shooting like they're snipers. Right?
That's true.
I'm
true.
utterly uninterested in that.
Yeah, those guys with SMGs are sniping you with SMGs. I agree with you.
Right. I'm like, get out of here with that.
Captain
right?
Jones
I'm not interested in the bullet sponge heavies, right? But what I respect about it is it's clear that CIG is testing different components within FPS gameplay, right? Like, so what does it mean to have in each area a couple of big dogs with heavy armor who can take more, right? And where do we want ultimately snipers to be positioned, right? And how are players going to have to react to that, things like that. To Meg's point, I think placing, and this can come with maybe hacking, right? Maybe you place a medical center on the admin center, right? So that if you can hack in, you can go get healed up at the tier 1 level like it's a hospital, right? So maybe and make it gameplay driven, like you got to hack in, right? You've got to take the space, or to operate the tier 1 equipment requires some skill set, right? It make it gameplay. But I like the idea of having some way to heal up while you're on those platforms. The last thing I'll say is, I don't know, I know people have seen this, and I think it might have been, trying to see who in the chat may have referenced this. It might have been Grim Reaper OG1 who referenced this earlier. Siege as an event has now led to missions where you take a single platform or a single building in Orison, right? Where you'll just get a mission now on the mercenary or bounty hunter side where you go and just take a singular building. And I think the learning that we're getting from Siege is informing these other missions. And that's what Alpha should be. But for me, Siege has the ability to, Siege is like 1A, and Xenothreat is here. Xenothreat is clearly the better mission for me. But Siege isn't that far away if they just tweak some of these things. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed with the Soul team and others playing and testing out Siege recently. And I like the responsiveness of CIG to try and solve for some of these people who were doing these speed runs, and to not only like subvert that, but to Meg's point, make not doing that fun, right? Make staying around and engaging in what's happening on the platform and methodically moving, make that fun, right? So, yeah.
Cool. All right, we're going to take on another topic here, gang, and this topic is going to be a little bit more well, let me show it to you first. And it's Invictus. We want to talk about Invictus for a second.
In a galaxy so vast, can one person make an impact? How do we rise above? Through camaraderie and competition, we coalesce. In our darkest hours, when all seems hopelessly lost. And in our proudest moments, we find in each other strength, hope, solidarity, the courage to leave the familiar behind in pursuit of the next great adventure. One person can make an impact, but together, we are capable of greatness. Each of us, part of something bigger. One galaxy, one empire, united in purpose.
Okay, now the reason why I show this is because this is not a dynamic event. It is an annual event that we're all familiar with. It takes place in the Star Citizen universe. But what I'm curious about is, what do you guys think about, because Tony kind of alluded to this a little bit, and it's the idea of something dynamic taking place at the event. He originally talked about the prices of food and things of that nature going up, increasing the amount of NPCs and population that come there because this big flight week thing is going on. But my question to you is, and I started wondering whether we saw hints of this. I think Jade and I had talked about this before, right when Invictus Fleet Week came up. And it was the fact that some of you all remember that there was vandalism at the IAE. I mean, not the IAE, at the Invictus. Or was it, no, it was IAE that there was vandalism at, right?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And we had talked about this idea of something taking place at these annual events like Invictus, like IAE, where, for example, Ninetales decides to actually, quote unquote, crash the party. You know, they literally do something, and players, if you happen to be on at that time, it's entirely up to just a random thing, but you might happen to be there, and they decide to do a raid on the convention center. Literally coming in and starting to kill people. I know this is an extreme piece, but I'm just trying to throw out some stuff here. There were a couple of ideas I had. One called Invasion, which is basically where they come into and start attacking ships that are maybe trying to fly in for the event. Another idea was protect the fleet. At Invictus Fleet Week, you guys know how the fleet moves around from one location to another. What happens if a call went out saying, hey, we're being attacked, you know, and they have to make it safely in to dock their ships? The other one would be the one I mentioned earlier, free the hostages. Maybe that they take some NPC hostages somewhere and you have to go in and take them out. I would love to see some type of dynamic things that kick off there that now give you a reason not just to come and click the rent-free button on a ship. You know what I mean? But there's some engagement and some immersion that takes place at those events. That's just one example I want to give, but I also want to give both Captain and Meg an opportunity to talk about maybe some things that they would like to see that happen dynamically in the universe. You know, whether it's because something happened or some type of event that you guys think would be kind of interesting to keep players engaged. So, Cap, I'll go to you first on this one. Any type of dynamic thing. Who was that who came in? Righty Bird, thank you for that follow. Smokey, thank you also for the follow earlier. Father Sweepers, thank you for the follow. Telstar, thank you for that follow as well. Appreciate all of you. Sorry we missed you earlier, but thank you.
No, thank all of you. Yes, absolutely. So, you know, you talked IAE a little bit. We talked Invictus. You know, what's interesting lore-wise about IAE is that the IAEs that we get are satellite events.
Mm-hmm.
There is a big permanent IAE event, and it's in Keel, the Keel system.
Mm-hmm.
And so every year there's the big event and then there's the satellite event we go to. I'd love to see a dynamic event that somehow tied those two things together when we get Keel in game. The other thing the other things that I thought about when you asked this question, as we were preparing for this question, were, I'd like to see, and the test bed is Stanton. It's a corporate mid security system. So you instead of having governments, right, and planets, you've got corporations, but maybe a potential corporate civil war.
Okay.
Right, where for some reason Colossal won't like this, but Hurston ends up with a beef with Microtech, and we have to participate. Right, so whether that is participating in the battle, participating in the Marshall Plan rebuilding of certain derelict settlements afterwards, or preventing rebuilding, seeing corporations take systems from one another, population exodus, doing the blockade better than the Nine Tails blockade, but quarantines and lockdowns, rescue and refugee support. I think all of those not only are interesting dynamic events, but also can be triggered systematically in terms of the quantum notes that Tony Z has talked about, right? Okay. So that's the type of thing I'd like to see. I can talk more, but I want to give Meg a chance.
Yeah, and I appreciate the fact you said that this is in the context of the testing ground of Stanton. We're not saying that this all happens in Stanton, but that is our playground to figure out how this can go into a bigger place in the universe. So that's very cool.
Right.
Meg, what you got? Anything that you would like to see happen, kick off unexpectedly in the verse?
With the introduction of distribution centers, I think it'd be cool to see something like, I think Tony was talking about it, or maybe one of you guys were talking about it, a dynamic event that triggers other dynamic events. So the distribution centers, maybe you have to go in there, raid it, get data to transfer, or like to unlock the locations for other places, where you have to go and get either cargo or hostages. I don't know, just something like that.
There was a video
where you have to go to different planets, maybe different like moons, not just like staying in one place, but it just like continues going and going and going. And then like maybe even potentially something like the 890 jump mission, but needing to take over, not destroying an entire ship, but taking it back over. So having to take out the fleet, take control of a ship, and then get it back and make sure that the people that are coming back in to try to take it back over, you can protect the ship and get it to where it needs to go. Something like that.
There was a video, Meg, I don't know if you saw it. It was what's the guy's name who's the mission giver, the very first mission giver guy we got? He used to sit in the bar. He's
Miles Eckhart.
Miles Eckhart. I don't know if you remember this, Meg, but the very first time we saw this guy, he gave a mission. We went and completed the mission. It was on a Starfarer to get like this, the black box or get the information. Then when he completed it, the Miles gave them an additional mission after that. So it wasn't just that one thing. And I'm thinking about what you're saying about the UGFs, that maybe once you've done something. And I think CIG did talk about this idea of missions that were built on several things and you could take it as far as you wanted to. So if you just complete the first phase, you decide to say, hey, that's all I'm going to do. That's cool. But there may be and you could, if you also do this, you know what I mean? And you could push it as far as you wanted to go. And of course the difficulties would increase as you go on. But I like the idea of what you're saying about these dynamic missions triggering other ones within them, which I think would be really, really cool. The UGFs are something I think a lot of us are excited about, seeing what's going to happen with those. Cause there's the dynamic of the administrative side, like there could be something like a hostage or a VIP mission, right? That happens there, right? The president of the UGF, something happens there. Or there's something that happens underground, in relation to moving cargo, like we've seen in their trailers and stuff. I think the UGFs are a great place to see any type like that kick off. Now, I don't know, do you guys, Mick, I know you do PvP a lot. Have you done that? Have you ever like responded to when those things happen? Because there is a dynamic thing that happens in the game now. Someone goes to Korea to clear their thing. Do you ever respond to those? Like when you say somebody has shut, is that Korea trying to clear their stat? Do you ever respond to those?
I do, yeah.
You do? Okay. Because I know there are some folks that'll show up You know, I've been there before, and they show up, and it's like, you know. There are people who are really into the whole bounty thing, you know, in the game, and I love when that happens, because it's one thing to know once you're going to go in there and fight the NPCs. It's another thing when you're sitting there watching your bar tick, and somebody says there's a ship inbound, you know, coming in,
and you hear a ship coming in or the turrets going off.
Yeah, the clock starts ticking.
Oh, and it happened to us the other night at Ghost Hollow as well.
Yeah, right? yeah, it did.
Once you clicked on, and I clicked on those terminals and started generating that money, then all of a sudden Cutlass Blacks came out of nowhere. They didn't know they were going to have to deal with Colossal, right? Dropping them bees on them, but
he sure did. Yep.
Yeah, and so you know we had to think about air power. We had to think about what happens. How long do we have?
Yep.
Right.
Evac.
And then we got out of there just in time. So yeah,
we think about evac too. We're like, let's go, man. We got time to get out of here. You know.
That's right.
So yeah, those are like you said, those are the seedlings, the beginning of what's going to happen later on. You know, a lot of times, you know, again, why we wanted to talk about dynamic events today, because it's very easy to think that, oh, this is all there is to it. But the reality is, no, this isn't all there is to it. This is the testing ground and the foundation for some bigger and better things that CIG wants to do later on. So, okay.
For me, it's important that they think about the curation of moments that humanize the events. Right? They give us personal moments. Like some stuff is just emergent gameplay.
Yes.
Like the fact that we got out of there and paid each other when we got back up to Tressler was just emergent game. That was just fun, right? But there will be events where I want a little bit more than Rowena Dooley saying good job.
Yeah.
Right. Like I want somebody to go you know, person to person communications in the game, and I see a face and they go, hey, I was there with my kid on the Stanton platform, and you saved our lives. Thank you. Right. Like I want a little bit more impact of our actions. And maybe it's across the game media or the news channels, right? Some of these screens that we see.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be important that Quanta ends up with a real diversity of outcomes, right? Not 3 outcomes like Mass Effect at the end, right? I want 333 potential outcomes, and I want real probability randomization. It ought to be the case a lot of the time that well-laid plans that players think are the meta just don't produce the outcome they want, right? Because it just didn't work that time.
Yeah.
Right. That's life. That's real, right? You get to a certain point and then you can't go any further. And it didn't. The Quanta stuff didn't add up. So I'm hoping all of that is getting built in as well.
Okay. Very cool. All right. Well, yes, we have been reading you guys' comments in chat. You guys have shared a lot of good stuff in here. Real quick, we've got a couple questions. One of them, actually, there are a couple crazy questions here, both from Fast Card. So I'll go ahead and acknowledge them because they're both from Fast Card. Yeah, how could I have not known, right? One of them was, what does the panel think that Jarrett was thinking while listening to Tony? You know, for me, it was SCL, right? And so, you know, one thing I could tell from Jarrett's expressions from time to time, he was reading comments, obviously, from people who are watching the show, you know. And every once in a while you see him write something down. So I'm sure he was writing things down because, as you guys know, put a quarter in Tony Z's back and you just let him go. You don't have to say very much. And that's kind of what happened. But what did you guys think what Jarrett might have been thinking?
Don't leak anything.
Don't leak anything.
Like I just did 2 ISCs with a bunch of interviews on this, and you spoiled it.
That's very true. And the last one that Fast Cart asks is Jumptown safe? And the answer is never.
Yeah.
Meg answered that earlier. It's always a hotbed no matter what. So, well, thank you, Fast Cart, for those. We appreciate that. As we mentioned earlier, gang, this is in the U.S., this is Black History Month, even though Black History runs throughout the year. It's a period of time that our country recognizes the contributions of African Americans. And so we want to highlight that as well. Each year we do that during the month of February. And as I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the show, we dedicated this show to the actor Carl Weathers, who passed away just a few days ago. And so we want to take a moment and just reflect on his life and maybe learn some things about him that maybe you didn't know. But we hope that you will enjoy this little bit that we're going to show real quick. So check it out.
There's nothing they'd like better than to see Apollo Creed give a local Philadelphia boy a shot at the greatest title in the world on this country's biggest birthday.
Carl Weathers has died. The veteran actor's family confirmed the news to ET on Friday. Carl, known to many as Apollo Creed, was 76 years old.
They just don't want to pay guild rates. They don't mind if things get sloppy.
Carl's family says he died peacefully in his sleep on Thursday, remembering their loved one as an exceptional human being who lived an extraordinary life.
It's been a tremendous relationship, for 10 years, to be with people. And I'm real happy to have been a part of it.
After playing Rocky Balboa's foe turned friend across the iconic franchise,
it comes with the job. I can accept it.
His memorable on-screen presence and impressive physique paid off again. This time with Arnold Schwarzenegger in Predator, with the two buff stars years later inspiring countless memes.
Yeah, it's all living.
Get off of me!
Of course, that serious demeanor also inspiring serious laughs in Happy Gilmore. Adam Sandler paying tribute on Instagram. Carl will always be known as a true legend. In recent years, Carl turned his focus behind the camera, pulling double duty as director and one of the stars of The Mandalorian.
I thought you had completed your mission, but you're still running around here with the same little critter.
Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni, man, they just keep throwing it down, and all of us in front of the camera and those of us who have the good fortune of working behind the camera and directing are just doing our best just to keep up and to, honor what these guys are putting down. And certainly John is just doing a magnificent job. So I'm a very fortunate guy to be a part of it.
I hope it never ends.
That makes two of us.
Okay. So that's the piece that we're doing tonight. Once again, our condolences to Carl Weathers' family. Definitely appreciate all of the dedicated hard work that he has done and contributed to make our lives better in an entertaining way. So, Maggie, anything you want to say about Carl Weathers?
I do not.
Nope. Okay. No problem. Cap, any thoughts? You're muted, my friend.
Yeah, sorry about that. Rest in power. I grew up with this dude. He represented a lot of things to me. I always wanted him to beat Rocky. So when he tied him and then lost to him and then, humbled himself to bring him back, and then we lost him in Rocky IV. It was nice that they went in the direction with Creed on the basis of that legacy. I loved him in Predator. And most recently, I loved him in The Mandalorian.
Okay.
Somebody early on in the chat said Mando, and now we know when you hear that was Carl Weathers. So
yes, definitely.
Action Jackson, tell the truth,
Action
new soul.
Jackson.
Action Jackson.
Oh my God, Action Jackson. Oh God.
just a solid cat. My understanding is that he played football before all that too.
That's correct. Yeah.
I'm not sure that Entertainment Tonight covered that, but just a broad life lived. You don't really know folks, but from what we know, just a celebrated individual, and he will be missed.
Absolutely. All righty. Well, listen, let's go ahead and wrap this up. We've had you guys here tonight. Thank you guys for being here. Real quick, Meg, would you talk about Thursday? Cap, would you talk about Saturday? And I'll talk about next Sunday.
Yes, so on Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, there will be Soul Talk, which is a roundtable discussion where everybody's welcome to join in the Discord. We talk about Star Citizen, what has happened over throughout the week, and normally cover Inside Star Citizen and Star Citizen Live.
Then on Saturdays is Soul Voices. Saturdays starting usually at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And that's where you get to join the live one-on-one conversation in Discord with Griff. where we're talking about a lot of the social media discourse of the week, be it on Reddit or Twitter or other places. And Soul Voices, of course, is part of PodSat or Podcast Saturday. So you come check us out at 3, then you head on over to Paul Shelley and the Astropub, and then the OGs of Star Citizen Relay in the evening.
By the way, I just remembered something. I'm having a procedure done on my throat on Friday. So I would tell you to be sure to check and see if something posts. If I say that, the show's not, if it's canceled, then you'll know why I'm not there. But it just dawned on me. I forgot that I don't know what my throat status is going to be on Saturday. So just, if you don't see us, then you know why I'm not there, gang. But hopefully I'll be able to talk since I'm doing it on Friday. Hopefully on Saturday, my voice will be back to normal. And
good luck with that, Griff.
Yeah,
good luck with that.
I'm hoping all goes well. And then next Sunday, we're doing a show called Light and Dark. And this show is going to be a little interesting. It's going to be, I don't want to say white nights and dark nights. That's not the word I want to say, but we do want to talk about why people feel so extreme one way or the other when it comes to Star Citizen and Squadron 42. So you're going to get some interesting opinions about why people feel very positive and why people may feel very negative about this project that we're all here backing and supporting. So that'll be next Sunday, 8 p.m. Eastern time. I know the Super Bowl's going on, so for those of you who want to enjoy the bowl, hey, enjoy yourself. But as always, we have some folks that usually are like, I'll watch Soul Citizens instead. So if you guys want to join us next Sunday, we will be here. Other than that, I think that's about it. I want to give a special thanks to both of my compadres here. Meg, let people know where they can find you.
You can find me on Twitch at yoyoMeg. I normally stream at 4 p.m. Central Time, Monday through Friday. Or you can find me on Twitter at I am yoyoMeg. Otherwise, you can find me here on Soul Citizens.
And Cap, how about you?
That's, I agree with yoyoMeg. You can find me here at Soul Citizens. You can find me in yoyoMeg's chat on Twitch, making it pop. You can also find me on my own Twitch channel. I just put in the chat, CaptainSeriousSFun. You can also find me with my long form YouTube videos. We dropped our first one on YouTube. And that's videos called Moonshot. And you can join the discussion there. Our second video will come off of Patreon on Saturday and be available to everyone there as well. So please like, subscribe, and join, but only after you have done so for all the outlets of Soul Citizens, right? Because Soul Citizens is why I'm here. So,
well, thank you guys so much for being here. We really appreciate you, all the raiders who came over, the new followers who followed us, subscribers. Thank you guys so much always for the wonderful support that you've given us. We are going to set you guys up for a raid to a new person that we've never raided before. I Play with Lights is playing in Star Citizen right now. Got a very low count, only had 2 viewers over there. So send some love to him. Check him out for a few minutes. If you like what you see, give him a follow, let him know that you came over from the Soul Citizens. And as always, we really, really, really appreciate you guys. Till then, stay safe, stay healthy, take care of yourselves. And as always, from all of us at Soul Citizens, peace, love, and soul. We'll see you guys later. Take care. Peace out.
Bye.
Peace.